We are at step 10 in my book, One Breath at a Time, but the section we were in reminded me of something else that I wanted to read from tonight. I am pretty much over my cold, but I never get over colds. They just stay in my lungs. So I've got a cough drop in my mouth, which sometimes might make noise. That's why I tell you that, because it might click or something. Ooh, so let's begin our meditation. What does that mean for you when I say that? Does that mean you're going to change the way you're sitting? Um, you know, Interesting to look at how we react. Um, Certainly, I like to sit in a way that's a little more upright than I might ordinarily when I'm meditating. And you can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. Letting your shoulders release, relaxing your jaw, softening the belly. So the sense of the body settling. It's interesting that as soon as we just stop and become mindful really of anything, that there's a really qualitative shift in how we feel and in our awareness. You might notice sounds or other sensations, or feelings that had been kind of below your conscious attention. So it's almost like shifting into a different perspective or even a slightly altered version of reality. Nothing really disturbing or radical, but just slightly different from how we're normally perceiving the world, how we're normally being in the world. So just letting that initial settling unfold for a couple of minutes. Just kind of awareness of sitting, awareness of feeling. Now starting to focus on the sensations of breath, just letting the mind coalesce around the breath, either at the nostrils or the belly. The breath at the nostrils is experienced as just the touch of air coming in and out, very subtle, sometimes actually difficult to feel. The breath at the belly is felt just as movement, as expansion and contraction. It can be helpful to make a mental note of the breath in, out, if you're following the breath at the nostrils, or rising, falling, if you're following the breath at the belly. It's natural for the mind to wander when we try to pay attention to the breath or to sustain our attention with the breath. So that effort we make is not to cling to the breath, but more to just return, to keep coming back, understanding that the wandering is bound to happen. The returning, though, is what helps us to develop concentration and to kind of enhance our tendency toward mindfulness. We train the mind to let go of thinking, not to stop thinking, but to gracefully let go when we see thoughts, and particularly when we see unhelpful or harmful thoughts. Or meditation becomes a training, a skill development, which can then be applied at any moment in our life. perhaps most important in our practice, is to be undisturbed by thoughts. If we are striving for perfect focus or concentration, and we can find ourselves annoyed or agitated, frustrated with the wandering mind. But if we can just be accepting of whatever arises, and still with a gentle effort and intention to come back, not giving up on that project, but not pursuing it with a kind of aggressiveness or need, force. And that attitude of acceptance in and of itself will tend to bring more calm. So this becomes the kind of paradox that by not striving, the meditation deepens more than it does if we are striving. All right. Um, so we have been going through my book One Breath at a Time for the last 16 months, and in step 10, and we just got past the introduction, and so the next section is called "Admitting We're Wrong," and I was going over my notes and looking through it today, and there's a quote here from Suzuki Roshi, the famous Zen teacher, and it it made me go and look that quote up, and it kind of uh, inspired me to read this section from this book of his, um, which I think has broad applications for us. Um, so, yeah, this is from the famous book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Suzuki Roshi was the founder of the San Francisco Zen Center, and these were, it's an interesting story. There's sort of some books about it. The one that's called Crooked Cucumber, I think someone actually took that. I had it at my book giveaway party. That was someone walked out with that, I think, because I was giving books away. And the story of the Zen centers is really interesting because you know. Uh, Suzuki showed up in San Francisco and kind of over during the 60s, this sort of following of hippies, you know, started to come around, and he found that they were more interested in zazen, in Zen meditation, than a lot of the Japanese who were presumably his original sort of flock, and so he became kind of I was going to say a cult figure, but I don't mean that in the sense of a cult at all, but just like a very popular teacher. And in any case, so the San Francisco Zen Center, which those of you in the Bay Area know, I'm sure know, quite an institution. And then these talks were just recorded and then transcribed and edited. But he died of brain cancer. Uh, I think maybe even before the book was published, but very shortly after that in 1971. It's kind of tragic, to say the least. But this book was one of the first Dharma books I was exposed to. Um, and when I was on the 3-month retreat in 1981, after lunch, the sitting after lunch, Jack Kornfield, for weeks and weeks, would just come in and read up a segment of the book, like a different little piece. And he wouldn't even read a whole section because the chapters are very short. They're like 3 pages, 2 pages, 4 pages. But he wouldn't even read a full chapter. But in that on that retreat, that's like the words got even more kind of into my consciousness and more impactful for me. So it's kind of one of those books that's very close to my heart. And as you know, I'm not a Zen practitioner, and so it's not. I don't read a lot of Zen, but there's an incredible amount of just brilliant little tidbits in this book. So this little chapter, I guess I can call it, is called "The Marrow of Zen," and I think it's worth reading the whole thing. We have time tonight. In our scriptures, Samyuttagama Sutra, volume 33, it is said that there are four kinds of horses: excellent ones, good ones, poor ones, and bad ones. The best horse will run slow and fast, right and left at the driver's will before it sees the shadow of the whip. The second best will run as well as the first one does just before the whip reaches its skin. The third one will run when it feels pain on its body. The fourth will run after the pain penetrates to the marrow of its bones. You can imagine how difficult it is for the fourth one to learn how to run. When we hear this story, almost all of us want to be the best horse. If it is impossible to be the best one, we want to be the second best. This, I think, this is, I think, the usual understanding of this story and of Zen. You may think that when you sit in Zazen, you will find out whether you are one of the best horses or one of the worst ones. Here, however, there is a misunderstanding of Zen. If you think the aim of Zen practice is to train you to become one of the best horses, you will have a big problem. This is not the right understanding. If you practice Zen in the right way, it does not matter whether you are the best horse or the worst one. When you consider the mercy of Buddha, how do you think Buddha will feel about the four kinds of horses? He will have more sympathy for the worst one than for the best one. When you are determined to practice Zazen with the great mind of Buddha, you will find the worst horse is the most valuable one. In your very imperfections, you will find the basis for your firm, way-seeking mind. Those who can sit perfectly physically usually take more time to obtain the true way of Zen, the actual feeling of Zen, the marrow of Zen. But those who find great difficulties in practicing Zen will find more meaning in it. So I think that sometimes the best horse may be the worst horse, and the worst horse can be the best one. If you study calligraphy, you will find that those who are not so clever usually become the best calligraphers. Those who are very clever with their hands often encounter great difficulty after they have reached a certain stage. This is also true in art and in Zen. It is true in life. So when we talk about Zen, we cannot say he is good or he is bad in the ordinary sense of the words. The posture taken in Zazen is not the same for each of us. For some, it may be impossible to take the cross-legged posture. But even though you cannot take the right posture, when you arouse your real way-seeking mind, you can practice Zen in its true sense. Actually, it is easier for those who have difficulties in sitting to arouse the true way-seeking mind than for those who can sit easily. So now this next paragraph is where the quote that I take comes from. When we reflect on what we are doing in our everyday life, we are always ashamed of ourselves. One of my students wrote to me saying, "You sent me a calendar and I am trying to follow the good mottos which appear on each page, but the year has hardly begun and already I have failed." Dogen Zenji says, "Shoshaku Jushaku." Shaku generally means mistake or wrong. Shoshaku Jushaku means to succeed wrong with wrong, or one continuous mistake. According to Dogen, one continuous mistake can also be Zen. A Zen master's life could be said to be many years of Shoshaku Jushaku. This means so many years of one single-minded effort. We say a good father is not a good father. Do you understand? One who thinks he is a good father is not a good father. One who thinks he is a good husband is not a good husband. One who thinks he is one of the worst husbands may be a good one if he is always trying to be a good husband with a single-hearted effort. If you find it impossible to sit because of some pain or some physical difficulty, then you should sit anyway using a thick cushion or a chair. Even though you are the worst horse, you will get to the marrow of Zen. Suppose your children are suffering from a hopeless disease. You do not know what to do. You cannot lie in bed. Normally, the most comfortable place for you would be a warm, comfortable bed. But now, because of your mental agony, you cannot rest. You may walk up and down, in and out, but this does not help. Actually, the best way to relieve your mental suffering is to sit in zazen, even in such a confused state of mind and bad posture. If you have no experience of sitting in this kind of difficult situation, you are not a Zen student. No other activity will appease your suffering. In other restless positions, you have no power to accept your difficulties. But in the zazen posture, which you have acquired by long, hard practice, your mind and body have great power to accept things as they are, whether they are agreeable or disagreeable. When you feel disagreeable, it is better for you to sit. There is no other way to accept your problem and work on it. Whether you are the best horse or the worst, or whether your posture is good or bad, is out of the question. Everyone can practice Zazen and in this way work on his or her problems and accept them. When you are sitting in the middle of your own problem, which is more real to you, your problem or you yourself? The awareness that you are here right now is the ultimate fact. This is the point you will realize by Zazen practice. In continuous practice, under a succession of agreeable and disagreeable situations, you will realize the marrow of Zen and acquire its true strength. So I think there are like a bunch of teachings in this, which and sometimes it's funny how he just sort of is going in one direction and then he just kind of goes off. Um, but first of all, um, this idea of the best horse is the worst horse because it's too easy for them. I th- I think this, for us in recovery, this whole piece about those who find great difficulties in practicing Zen will find more meaning in it. I think really speaks to uh, the condition of us in recovery that we life hasn't been easy for us. And sure, we've made it hard on ourselves, but, whatever the cause is, and then, our appreciation of life, uh, is somewhat that much greater. And it also gives us this, uh, this great determination to practice. I mean, both, to both practice our meditation and to, to grow in all the ways we have to uh, in recovery. And I've talked about this in my, how sometimes, the kind of what they call the bedstand Buddhists, people who just have some Buddhist books that they read before they go to sleep, or, they drop into Spirit Rock now and then or something. And maybe they're kind of comfortable in their lives, there's nothing really, there's no fire for them driving them to practice. And so I think that's a really, really important thing to appreciate for us, as much as it can feel like it's hard. And I do feel like, I have to practice, it's not like a thing like I'm striving for enlightenment, it's striving for uh, just to survive this day, Um, then of course this phrase, one continuous mistake. I remember when this really came through to me, and I'd had this book for several years and sort of read it, as I said, had it read to me, and I'd probably read through it, but there was a moment when I was about a year sober, and I was um, not quite a year sober, so I was kind of on the verge of really, because it was only after I got a year that I started to really engage in the program, and I was with a band in Vancouver, British Columbia, and we were playing a gig at the Expo '86. That's how I know what year it was. And we were in the van on the way to the gig, and I was reading this, and I just remember that line, that one continuous mistake. shoshaku, jushaku. And just the sense for me of relief from that, you know, and, and it's kind of what I carry in my practice, you know, the idea that, um, it's okay, it's okay to not be perfect. Um, I mean, and that even, that it's even maybe even more than okay, but that's a description of life, one continuous mistake. Um, there's another moment I recall when I was coming back from a retreat uh, in Yucca Valley in the 90s. And this was right when I was on the verge of becoming a teacher. I think it was soon before that. And a bunch of us had to crowd into a car. And as I recall, I was sitting on somebody's lap, trying to going to the airport. That couldn't have been very safe. But anyway, I never trust these recollections as being literal. But in any case, I was very close to someone, and I said to them that I've failed at everything I've done, and that's been my greatest success. And they were like, "You're crazy. What are you talking about? That's it's nothing. That's not good." And I was like, "No, you don't understand. It is. It's really good. Um, it's where I've learned, right? It's where I've been motivated. If I hadn't gone to AA, you know, I just would have had this sort of rambling, unfocused life. If I hadn't admitted I was an alcoholic, which is, as we know, like one of the biggest failures you can have in your life, like an alcoholic, that's terrible. I mean, the last thing, you have kids, you're like, I sure hope they grow up to be alcoholics. No, you don't want them to be alcoholics. But, I mean, I do. It's funny because sometimes I do. I don't wish my daughter to be an alcoholic, and I'm glad that she doesn't appear to be one. But I also sometimes think, it might be good for her. Uh, Fortunately, I don't have control over that, and having that thought won't make it happen. But yeah, uh, you know, this being the worst horse. So, what I also hear underneath this, I mean, it's funny, this line he has, the the mercy of the Buddha. It's not a phrase I've really heard anywhere else. When you consider the mercy of the Buddha, how do you think the Buddha will feel about the four kinds of horses? But, if we just think about this, not so much as the mercy of the Buddha, but just as compassion, it really speaks to also, the need for self-compassion, for compassion for all beings, but for compassion for ourselves when we are the worst horse, you know, um, and when our practice comes up short, and when we can't sit still, or um, when we can't do it right, or when we relapse, or what, um, you know. So um, I just kind of love that idea. Um, One continuous mistake, I think, also, just points to impermanence, what we were talking about right before we started, when with people's cars breaking down, like, yeah, of course, cars break down because everything is falling apart. That's um, the nature of things. So I don't know if I need to go into one breath at a time. I think I'd like to hear what you guys think about that. Does it make you feel good? Or does it make you feel bad to think, oh, one continuous mistake, that's terrible? Uh,
Kevin, this is Catherine. It's actually helpful for me tonight. I've been relapsing in work addiction, and a little bit with caffeine addiction, which is sort of related for me.
Mhm.
And then feeling sort of like, and then feeling like, well, what the hell? I've been doing all this work in recovery and I'm back here anyway. So why even try anymore?
Mhm.
So first of all, it's good to be reminded you can be the worst horse.
Yeah.
And then it's also good to be reminded, yeah, you're not going to give up, which I already knew it. So even though I was like, I might as well give up, I already knew like that doesn't work. So it's good to be reminded, like, let the fact that this is hard give you more determination.
Yeah.
You need more determination then, or not need it, but given that it's difficult, that's a reason to keep going, not a reason to say I'm stopping. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And, and more determination and to me, more forgiveness, that we're not piling on. I mean, our meditation practice itself, uh, I've said this recently and could say it every time, when we're teaching meditation, we say, keep coming back to the breath. Well, when you say keep coming back to the breath, it means that you understand that people's minds keep wandering. So, so failure is built in as a natural part of meditation practice. And of course, that's also the same phrase that we say at the end of every 12-step meeting, keep coming back, again, assuming that, relapse or just the need for this self-care and this group care is vital. It's not that, because we could say, one continuous mistake is also saying we need continuous vigilance, continuous practice. We need to keep showing up uh, because the nature of the disease of addiction, but also the nature of the disease of life, of dukkha, the nature of dukkha is persistent. And there is no, as Jack Kornfield says, no enlightened retirement. Um, so, this is all in the context of step 10, which says, you know, we continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. We continued to have, because of one continuous mistake, we continued to take personal inventory, so there's the direct connection with the step. Um, Rachel, hi.
Hello.
Good morning.
Yes. um, so when well, to answer your question, yes, this was a helpful reading. When you got to the point in the reading where it talks about the calligrapher and the dexterity, that reminded me of something that I've heard in the rooms a lot, which is very often the brightest people are the ones that have the most difficulty comprehending the aspects and working this program. And of course, early in sobriety, I found that offensive, but I also, in my experience of watching a lot of people grow in the program, it has a lot of validity. So yeah, anyway, that's what it reminded me of.
Yeah.
The dumber you are, the easier the program is.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's there's a certain type of intelligence that gets in the way, right? It's not because, you know, it's a certain type of highly analytical, out of touch with their feelings, non-intuitive, whatever, kind of uh, that that and that kind of intelligence is often rated as the the highest form of intelligence in our society, which is one of the terrible uh, mistakes of our educational system. I can say that from my experience of teaching that some of the most intelligent people are not good at school. And so they get told that they're not intelligent. Anyway, that's a digression. But yes, it is interesting that a certain kind of intelligence makes it more difficult for you to do spiritual practice, and certainly yeah, a kind of perfectionism. um yeah, yeah, thank you. Hmm. Got me going there. Anybody else want to join in here?
Kevin?
All right, Mike.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for taking this meeting and sharing your insights with us. I'm Mike. I'm an alcoholic. And when you were going through that process of continual failure, Suzuki's process of continual failure, it reminded me of a couple of things. One is that famous line from the Big Book that we have a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance of our spiritual condition. So they kind of knew this back then, and and many of us know that today, that it's one day at a time. That you start all over, and it's like the rock of Sisyphus in a certain sense, but you just keep at it, and bringing it back around to the 10th step. What I always say is that life presents us with endless opportunities to improve.
Mhm.
So there is no shortage of those opportunities, and we just get to do it over and over again. And if you look at it from the right perspective, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. As you said, there's no graduation, there's no retirement from this. You don't go off and walk away from this.
Mhm.
This is, we practice these principles in all our affairs, and this is one of the practices that I have adopted. And I was glad to discover this meeting and discover your book, and I appreciate it. I greatly appreciate it, and it's a wonderful book. And not to belabor the point, but many moons ago, I went to my first detox,
Mhm.
and it was a place called the Freeport Hospital, which you folks on the West Coast are probably not familiar at all. But in the New York metropolitan area, it has a certain renown, I guess you could say, but it no longer exists, to
Mhm.
make a long story short. In any case, they practiced something back then called reality therapy, which was, put forward by a fellow named William Glasser, a psychiatrist named William Glasser.
Mhm.
And so I was in a discussion with a counselor there one day, a fellow named Don, nice guy, and he said to me something which kind of, what Rachel just said was reminiscent. What he said to me was, Mike, I'd rather deal with just about anybody than a smart ass like you, because you think you have all the answers. So
Mhm.
you're not going to learn. You're not going to learn. And so, needless to say, that was my first detox. Thanks
Right.
again, Kevin.
Thanks, Mike. You smartass. Recovering smartass. Well, it reminds me too. I want to know more about that place now, but it reminds me too of there's a story about a Thai, one of the Thai forest masters, who said that he found that uh, 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 the people who had what's called like there's like these personality types in Buddhism, the greed type and the aversive type. The greed type is like somebody who's like kind of wants to get it all and is like, kind of excited about like, oh yeah, let's do that. And, new experiences and, you know, and then the aversive type is like, you know, kind of bothered by everything. And he said that he much preferred working with the aversive type, who tend to be less easygoing, shall we say, and that he liked the aversive types because the greed type always thinks that something really good is about to happen. And so they're kind of like, you know, not they don't suffer enough, basically. It's like, or they don't realize they're suffering because it's like something good's about to happen. But the aversive type is like everything bothers them, so they really want to like get out of this and give me a way out. And the practice is their, you know, their motivation uh, to get out of that pain of aversiveness. Sort of interesting. Joe C. from California.
Yes, indeed. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Joe.
So something came up for me with regard to these three horses and so forth. I was in an ACA group, and at one point, the four of us were traveling all over Mariposa County to try to get to our meetings, and it just became too much. So our little group sort of diverged, and I. So there was an AA meeting that was occurring in Yosemite Valley, and so I went to that. And this is just a real example of ego. I sort of went, well, you know, I've been doing this ACA stuff and so forth, but I'm going to go to this AA meeting, and you know, I don't have these problems that these AA people do, you know, but still, it's still the 12 steps, and I'm going to go in there. And so there was a guy that spoke up, and he described how he had, you know, I think he had been drunk the night before and had a real rough time, but still he managed to get up and get to work that day and perform in his job. And then he was at this meeting later on in the day, and I was just really struck, Kevin, because I realized the courage that this person had, and how the rubber was really meeting the road with this person, and how it wasn't an intellectual thing for him, but a very immediate thing for him. And it was a point of enlightenment, shall I say, for me.
Yeah.
Because I sort of realized the real difficulties that people can have trying to do things. I mean, and my respect was huge. You know, and I felt like rather than the people in the AA group sort of being maybe not as good as me, I felt like I was perhaps not as good as them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can relate to that experience. That, I mean, you know, because I had my arrogance about being a big meditator when I got sober too, and you know, thinking that I knew something more than people in the program, and quickly discovering that that was not at all the case. Like I could say that like different kinds of intelligence, there are different types of spiritual growth, and being a good meditator is one of the probably least useful or meaningful forms of spiritual growth. And here I am, a meditation teacher, who and that's because I see meditation as a vital underpinning for spiritual growth, but alone, it's like, you know, having the seasoning without the actual food. I think like I'll have some salt instead of having an egg, um, or I'll take a vitamin C pill instead of eating an orange. It's just a tool that needs to be part of a whole, integrated package. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting, that there's a lot of ways that people um, can be disparage the 12 steps in a way, interesting, and mostly because they don't understand them. Um, uh, in any case, let me see. Is there something else I want to say? Coming up, it's pretty far off, August, but in a couple weeks, I'm going to teach a day long with Vimalasara, who I think a lot of you know. She's a wonderful Buddhist teacher. We're going to do a day long virtually for Spirit Rock on recovery. And actually, Vimalasara goes as they, so I should not refer to I should refer to them. And that's, what did I just say? It's Saturday, August 7th. So you can register for that now. I'm also going to be teaching a retreat in North Carolina starting on September 1st, 1st to the 6th. If you are on the East Coast, if it's not full, it is filling up for sure. And other than that, do I have anything else? I don't see anything else other than Tuesdays and Fridays here. Oh, I'm going to speak at an AA group live, which I don't know, in Marin on July 24th, 930 Tamalpais Avenue in San Rafael, 3 o'clock. And it seems to be a few different speakers. So on step 3, I will also add that if you can make offer dana to me through various methods that Angela has posted on here. And I think that's it for now. Let's just close with a little bit of metta practice. So we've all been fortunate to discover recovery and Dharma to some degree or the other, each of us. And as we see the benefit that brings to our own lives, we can develop the wish that others may have this same freedom that comes from this path of recovery. So beginning with the sense of gratitude for our own good fortune, for our own good karma, we radiate outwards to all beings the wish that they may be free from suffering. May all beings experience joy and gratitude. May all beings be free from suffering. Thank you.